Hi, I'm Romi.
And I'm Nicole. Welcome to the Her Pursuit Pod, where we share our journey of building our business, The Daily Drip, a dynamic media platform that provides content and community for more than 4,000 South Florida female CEOs, founders, business owners, executives, and professionals.
Whether it's through our newsletter, events, or this podcast, our hope is to inspire your next big move and arm you with the tools you need to crush it. So tune in on your drive to work, wind down with us after a long day as we share our journey and the journeys of other remarkable business leaders on Her Pursuit.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Her Pursuit. My name's Nicole. I'm co-founder of The Daily Drip, and I'm here alongside my partner in crime, Romi Wallach. We're joined today by two very special thought leaders. We have Nicole Cumberbatch, founder of the Motherhood Village, and we have Miss Kelly Toliday, who is the host of the Transform with Travel podcast and travel extraordinaire. So we are here today to have this conversation. I'm so glad I got you two back in the studio. So for all of you guys listening, this episode was really born out of the aftermath of an episode we recorded a couple months back. We had you, Kelly, we had Nicole, and we were talking about wellness. We were talking about the importance of taking care of yourself in a pressure cooker position with, leadership roles, running a business, as a parent, like the importance of filling your cup, taking care of your health, taking care of yourself so you can feel good to do good. And I learned so much about you on that episode. I remember when you came out with your story about your decision to go sober. And the whole time we're recording that episode, I was like, this is a podcast episode. This is a podcast episode. And so I'm really glad we got you guys back into the studio to have this conversation because we all had such good opinions. Nicole, you had great hot takes and perspectives. And I thought, what better time to do this than after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, Hanukkah, like the holiday season's wrapping up. Are you doing a dry January? I got to know, like, who's doing dry January, but all the things. So I want to cover everything today. So before we get into it, Kelly, why don't you tell everybody your sober lifestyle story? Because I think the most compelling thing about it is your why.
Well, thank you. So I guess I would say it started back in 2017. I was a couple years in living in Sydney, Australia. I was working in media. And if anything knows anything about the media industry is that there's always loads of parties and publisher parties and Facebook's inviting you here and Yahoo's inviting you there. And you're kind of just expected to drink. And when I first moved to Australia, my first real job there, coming straight out of college, straight from like a U.S. university into an Australian working culture, especially in media, you kind of get this sense of, okay, you don't get drunk at the workplace. You wouldn't black out at the workplace, hopefully. But I got to Australia, and 3 or 4 years after being there and landing this job, I was like, oh, the drunkest person at the party is getting the promotions. Like, it was serious. It was very much like, I actually can't believe this is happening inside the workplace. And, and I love Australia. My husband's Australian. My kids are Australian. But there's a very, very pervasive drinking culture there. And so, yeah, that kind of started there, kind of looking around being like, I don't really like who I am being right now when I'm drinking. I definitely hit a series of personal rock bottoms, which wouldn't look like your classic alcohol addiction rock bottom, but for me it felt like a rock bottom. Definitely a handful of professional rock bottoms. And I just remember writing in my journal after one of them being like, I know one day I'm going to stop drinking. I just don't know how, and I don't know when. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I wrote it down in a journal in 2017. In 2018, my husband and I left Sydney to go travel Southeast Asia, and it was very easy to scale back on drinking there because the juices are at all the bars, the smoothie bowls, the coconut waters. Like, it's very easy to choose not to drink in Southeast Asia. And so I definitely throttled back there. So that was kind of the start of it that year, was reading sobriety books. My first one was Sober Curious by Ruby Harrington, I believe her name is. Or Warrington, is that her name? Yeah. It's a great book, and she just really dives into the statistics, and it's, not woo-woo at all. It's really just like how your body is metabolizing alcohol, what it's doing to your brain, how it's affecting your potential really as a human. And another book was This Naked Mind. That is like, I think I read the first 10 chapters and was like, not ready for that, goodbye, and I put it away. And it wasn't until last year that I picked it back up again 6 years later, 7 years later. So I was going on this journey for many, many years of drinking a little bit and then stopping, and then, going on a binge and then stopping, and kind of going back and forth of having these periods of not drinking and then drinking again. And anybody that would have known me in the last 4 years, 5 years would never be like, oh, she was a big drinker, because I really wasn't in those years, but it was enough for me to just feel like it was wearing on me. I'd wake up in the mornings and feel, what did I say? Did I say too much? I'd have anxiety for 3 days.
Anxiety. I love that word.
Anxiety. I would have heart palpitations. So I dealt with heart palpitations for a very long time, and it would get predominantly worse when I like after a night of drinking. And a night of drinking could be 1 glass of wine, and I would still get the heart palpitations. I'd have the anxiety. Mainly, I would just feel like a little bit of shame, like, oh, did I say too much? Did I overshare? Did I laugh too loud? Like, all of those things were getting in my mindset. So fast forward, back and forth of stopping drinking. That last year in October, a family member of mine had a heart condition come about, and another family member of mine was having a series of biopsies done all at the same time. And when I found out about that, I just said, enough's enough. Like, I have a series of alcoholism in my family with multiple family members on both sides of substance abuse. And I was just like, between the health conditions, me already not feeling well, drinking, like 1 glass of wine. And I was definitely not the best mom that I could be, because I was tired. I was, anxious. I was less tolerant. I was less patient. And yeah, I woke up and I said, that's enough. And I guess really, if I step it back a month prior to that, so this is last October 2024, in September, I ran a retreat in Costa Rica, and we had 10 women going, and 2 of the women, they're outgoing, they're funny, like you just feel this presence of like, oh, they're the party girls, like they're ready to have some fun. And on retreat, we don't restrict anyone from not drinking. We tell everyone, be mindful, don't ruin other people's experiences, don't ruin your own experience by not being too hungover to go to a yoga class or something. But I remember being in the car with them, driving from the airport to our retreat center, and I said, oh, I can't wait for an Imperial. Like, that was my first international beer when I was, 18 in Costa Rica and having an Imperial. And they were like, oh, yeah, I hope they have Imperial Zero. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, no, we don't drink anymore. And I was like, okay. If these 2 badass women who are so funny, life of the party, they're in it, they're dancing, they're having fun, if they could be living life and traveling and just having so much fun and not have to have alcohol, and I've been on this journey for 7 years, that's definitely time for that. Then I found out the health diagnoses, and then the next day I woke up and I said, that was my last drink. And I haven't since. It's been October 2024, so a little over a year. And yeah, I don't even think about it anymore. It's literally just not even something in my radar.
What have you felt is the biggest difference, though, for you? And I want to also know, what was your drink of choice? Like, if you had to say going out, like, what was the drink you always gravitated toward? Was it just wine?
Yeah, I definitely didn't drink liquor. I was not a liquor person, because I always hated being out of control. Like, you drink and then you'd get out of control and you're like, oh, I don't even like that. So I was never a liquor person. I would say like beer and wine, maybe. I didn't really like the seltzers. I wasn't really into all of that. And I will preface this to say, I grew up in a family that was the life of the party. People come to our house. Family vacations is, there's a cooler of beer on every boat ride. Like, it was never, oh, it's a problem, but it definitely was present always. And so there's that. And then growing up in South Florida I don't think it's party culture. Private high school, party culture, and then going to Florida State, which is known to be a massive party school. And that's basically what I did for 4 years. I'm lucky enough that I was able to do great academically and not really try that hard. But yeah, it was really bad. I credit moving from Tallahassee straight to Sydney for not spiraling into quite a bad issue with things, alcohol and others, because it's a different culture there for that. And then when a few years later, when I got into media there, then it kind of picked itself back up again.
But yeah, what's the change though? Since, like, what have you feeling since, because when I think of alcohol, I think of like hard liquor. Yeah. So I'm like, beer and wine. I never was a beer drinker. Wine doesn't. I like my tequila. I like my rum. Like, I like my I was a Hennessy girl at some point, Crown Royal, like I've done all of that. Vodka is what I started with. So in my mind, I'm like, beer, like what changes have you found from not even, and I don't even just say the beer and wine, but what has changed in your body so much since not
A
having
whole
alcohol?
year alcohol free. Is there anything tangible that you can say that you feel like a year later?
1,000%. So from a physical point of view, I am eating the same, working out the same. I've probably lost maybe 10 pounds without trying. And beyond that, it's the inflammation. Like even on my worst menstrual cycle day, I am not puffy. I mean, I don't have the red in my face. I don't feel that inflamed layer that you feel when you're hungover and dehydrated. I just feel like everything's kind of dropped down, and I feel like my body is where it's supposed to be at naturally without trying to manipulate or change it too much. Of course, I still work out 3 times a week because I love it. I'm moving, I'm active, I eat well because I love it. But I'm not adding on, 300, 400, 500 extra calories multiple times a week by drinking.
I was going to say, you were active before you went sober.
Yeah.
You were still working out.
It's the
You were
same
very
exact
much
routine, yeah.
a
But I've
healthy
just
eater.
lost 10 pounds. My sister, since me going sober, she has not drank in really almost a year as well, and she's lost 20 pounds. She's had multiple friends in her sphere of influence that have lost, and it's not by restricting. Literally, people have asked me, one of our thought leaders asked me, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just not drinking alcohol.
Making the conscious decision. But I need to ask, and I don't want to, because I feel like there's so much, and maybe even someone listening, if you talk about Italian culture, they drink, I mean, we had wine everywhere. Do you think it's part of because, and Sydney, I'm sure, is your experience there was something different as well. That's their culture. But I'm saying being in the United States, and this is for everyone here to have this conversation, wine is acceptable in Italy. They're not talking about, I mean, there's a lot of things in Europe that we know that are much healthier than what we do here. Do you think it's because of the culture, because everywhere we go, it is a drink, and because it's more than just, okay, I'll have a glass of wine, and because it's this pervasive, like, well, I need to have 3 to, to feel comfortable. Is that what you think it is? Because someone from Italy could be like, but we drink wine all the time, and we don't
but they
have
drink
that problem.
differently. Like in
That's
Italy,
my whole point.
They drink for la dolce vita, right? It's the same way they eat. They eat in moderation. They drink in moderation, and it's part of the experience. And it's very, it's not drinking to numb.
And that's
it's
my whole
actually
point. That's where
drinking
I'm
to be
coming with this.
present
Yes.
and feel. Whereas I feel like here, it's like, like this mom wine culture. And it's like, oh, I got to pour a glass of wine out of
Or
a hard
business
day.
culture.
Or business culture. I mean, I'm the first to say, like, sometimes after like a super stressful day, or there have been times, Sebastian's had a baseball game or something like that, and a few of the mom friends, like, they would bring a little rosé and we'd have it in our little cups, and it was like this wind down kind of concept.
Yes.
That just doesn't exist in Europe.
That's my whole
That's
point.
just not how they look at drinking.
But I will say, I mean, I would like to see the statistics of alcoholism across Europe and here, because it's hard to say just because they don't drink excessively doesn't mean that it's still not a problem within family structures. Also, alcohol in and of itself, whether the intention is to black out or whether the intention is to enjoy yourself, alcohol in its very substance dulls your senses. So you're not actually present. Like physiologically, it dulls your senses down. So even though you might feel like you're more present, it's not actually happening on a physiological level. So sometimes I think it's just, we try to paint this picture sometimes of what other countries are doing, and sometimes it's a little bit more romanticized, and you guys have a different experience because you grew up in that culture. So I could be wrong here, but I will say at the end of the day, what's happening is that your senses are getting dulled, and you are not actually as present as you could be if you were there fully sober and you were there fully with what's happening in the moment.
Which is, I think, goes back to the point, which is we've become such a nation, especially we're talking the U.S., this is where we live, where, to your point, you hear, I mean, what's the joke? Everyone has their Yetis or Stanleys, and there's alcohol at 9 a.m. Or we talked about the travel before we got on, we're at the airport and it's 10 a.m. Oh, we have to have a shot, girls trips, right? It's like we've romanticized that alcohol has to be there for the enjoyment, for the fun, to calm the nerves.
It's interesting. So I didn't grow up, like, my family weren't drinkers. It just wasn't a thing. Like, I saw my parents drink at events. Like, we'd go to someone's bar mitzvah, they'd have a drink. I think I saw my parents open practically no alcohol at home. It just wasn't a thing. What I noticed when I had kids is that it was very present, like bunch of families get together, hanging out, and like not a drink or two, like they were having quite a bit to drink. And it did get romanticized. It became so normalized that like, this shit's so hard, we need to drink. Like, and that's how you bonded, was through that experience. And for me, I don't operate in absolutes. Like, I don't think it has to be all or nothing. That's just not how I operate. I always like was the one, I'd go to family function. I'm the fun cousin, like I'm the one who had probably one too many, but I'm not a bad drunk. Like, it doesn't bring out a bad side in me. But when last year I had a really, really tough year, like my husband and I both were starting businesses. His mom got really sick. It was very stressful on us as a family. He was back in Toronto a lot. And the night that my mother-in-law passed away, my husband was in Canada and I was here, and two of my best friends were here. And they were like, let's get you out. Like it was just like I'd hit, like that was it, like maximum, all I could handle. And we went out that night, and what seemed like just a regular, having a couple drinks, one led to, I don't even know how many. I literally threw up at the restaurant, threw up in the car on the whole way home. Woke up the next morning, I like just wished I had died. Like it was so, so awful. And it was more a function of, in that moment, first of all, I'm not 20 anymore, so I don't bounce back the next day. But it was like, that for me was like an aha moment of, I don't want to feel like this. Like I don't like that, and I don't feel better. Like my whole year, I don't feel better because of what I just did last night. Like I didn't wake up in the morning and be like, oh, that year really wasn't so bad after all. I just purged it out. It was like a purge of alcohol, a purge of emotion, but it made me really think about how I wanted to move forward drinking. And I go to a shit ton of networking events, and it's so prevalent. Now, one thing I will say, I personally don't drink at events. I would never have more than a drink. I don't personally like a sloppy drunk at a business function. That's just me. What I noticed was, so I stopped drinking through January, and then I started doing 75 hard, which has a no drinking component. And it was very seamless to go into it. What I found really interesting was how much it bothered other people that I wasn't drinking. I wasn't judging. You drink the whole bottle, like drink yourself blackout. Like I don't judge, like you do you. Like I made a decision because I didn't like how I felt. It wasn't good for me, whatever the case may be. But I would find myself in these situations where I would have these conversations. They're like, you're not drinking? Why aren't you drinking? Like they were defensive about it, as if it was a them thing. And I was just thinking, obviously you have some stuff to work out, because if it bothers you that I'm not drinking and you need me to make you feel good about the fact that you're drinking, I think you should go home and think about why you're drinking, right? Like why is my not drinking making something trigger in you?
Especially because, so this is the thing, people want there to be a problem, so they don't have that problem. You know what I mean? Yeah. People ask, well, did you have a big problem? And I was like, no, not really. I was barely drinking before I stopped. And then they were like, well, so then why did you stop? And like they want there to be a reason for them to not have to, because they don't have as bad a problem as you. So if you're choosing, like myself, to do it for lifestyle, for health, for clarity, for like forward momentum, honestly, to just literally be at my full potential all of the time, sometimes 80% because kids don't sleep all the way, but I'm definitely at a higher percentage of the potential of who I can be because I'm not drinking. That's what my thing is. For other people, it might be not shopping online. For other people, it might be turning off social media. Like whatever's blocking you from being at your full potential, like you need to analyze that. And I remember I was just telling my husband, it takes 3 to 5 days for alcohol to leave your physical body, but it takes 14 days to leave your brain-blood barrier. And so if you're not giving yourself at least 14 days from your last drink, your brain is never going to be recovered from that alcohol. And slowly over time, it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And a lot of times it's not completely correlated. I don't believe, I might be wrong here. Don't come at me. But like Alzheimer's, dementia, like it is related 100% to, or correlated at least to people who have not just severe drinking, it's moderate to mild as well. So it's like
alcohol is poison,
but
like it is literally poison. Yeah. We drink it, it's fine, but truly,
well, that's what it is.
And really, not only that, it goes through such process, right? So there's a lot of
ingredients that are put in. Like I read a really interesting article around that, around like the different wineries and like where your wine comes from, and looking at the preservatives that they put in it. And there's a lot of shit in a lot of the wine and a lot of the
Which,
stuff.
going back to my Italy comment, to your point, but they also have wines that's organic. It doesn't have all this stuff. I mean,
At the end of the day, and it's not like ethanol is ethanol, alcohol is alcohol. So it's like we can say organic and this and that, but at the end of the day, it's ethanol. But what I was trying to say was, I was telling someone recently about the brain blood barrier in 14 days, and they're like, well, you know, you always make me feel really bad when you say that stuff. And I was like, I'm stating a fact. If you feel bad about a fact, then you need to re-examine your relationship. Like, that's not on me. I'm not saying it in a bad tone. You asked me something about alcohol. I gave you an answer of what your question was, and now you feel bad about it. There's something within you that's guiding you to maybe reevaluate your relationship.
when I did Dry January last year, and every year my husband does like a challenge. And he went a whole year without drinking alcohol. He's all the time. And actually, I want to ask: is your husband not drinking alcohol?
No, he drinks.
My husband wasn't, and I was at points. So he was like, "Well, let's do Dry January together." And we did, and we went to a party where the friends of ours, they're known to have parties with. I mean, even. It kind of reminded me of how I grew up too. We had a lot of substance abuse in the parties where alcohol was like the flow, and kids were kind of playing, and the parents. And I'm watching this sober. And I'm like, wow, the kids are like watching their parents be so like sloppy and drunk. And I'm like, I couldn't even imagine like my son, because like we never have grown up parties. If we're going to have a grown up party and have, like, he's staying at my parents. Like, I just feel like kids, even at 3-4 years old, can understand that energy. So that was one too. One of the girls came up. She's like, oh, you want to take shots? And I'm like, I'm doing Dry January. I'm not. And same thing. She was so defensive to the point that I was trying to not get angry because she was becoming like very almost disrespectful, and I had to like have grace, because I was like, number one, she's under the influence, so she's already lost, to your point, the senses. Number two, that's her issue, not mine. So as kindly as I could to be like, step off before we have a real problem, you know, I had to just have grace. But she told another girl, she was like, I don't trust her because she's not drinking. Like,
Oh, I've heard that. That's a crazy comment.
And I mean, it was to the point like I had to walk away and go sit with the guys, because my husband wasn't drinking either, but the men weren't doing that to him. It was the women, you know, and they just could not understand it. But it's the insecurity part. I'm a very empathetic person, and my father is a recovering alcoholic. I think he almost has 20-something years of sober, which is massive. I had a cousin who died at, I think, 36 of alcoholism. So again, very prevalent. But I say all that because when I told the girl, I'm like, honey, you don't know if I'm not drinking, even though I said Dry January. What if I had an actual problem? Like, what if, you know, I'm 30 days sober of like, could be life or death, and you're sitting here telling me like, but have a drink, and like almost wanting to put in my face. But I think it goes back to this culture, and you mentioned the mommy culture, and obviously this is a women's podcast, a business podcast, and we probably need to have an expert on of like the really dig deep of why we feel comfortable. Because I didn't start drinking alcohol till I was in my mid-20s, which was late. I was like 25. Because I grew up in a household with a father who drank, I was one of those at like 18, 19. I'm like, I'm going to party and I don't need alcohol. I'm drinking water. And I was the first on the dance floor. Like, I had to prove a point. But then you get older, and I was like, all right, I think I'm more responsible. And maybe I was, because I waited so long. But I've definitely had my share of like blackout nights and stuff of just having fun, and, you know, whoever I was dating, and we're having a good time or whatever. But I want to get back to the mommy culture, because I want to say a quote from Forbes. And basically said that an average of 63% of adults drink frequently. That's 6 out of 10. How many people are in this office, right? Right now we have 10. While the drinking trend, though, they say is still on the decline among the younger generations, there is a group where it's steadily on the rise, and that's mothers. Now, my father goes to meetings, and he has said the saddest that he sees of more women coming in, that's the group that he sees more coming in, are women and mothers, because of this drinking culture. So I say all that to say is, how do we fix that? Is it someone like a Kelly to step up and say, yeah, I'm not drinking? Actually, with my mom community, one of the moms, especially because she's pregnant, she's like, can we have an event like doesn't have alcohol? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, we're going to have mocktails as an option to make those feel comfortable that might be like, I don't really want to drink, but I don't know how to be the only one in the room not drinking when it's so customary when everyone else is.
We'll say it's a superpower. It's a superpower.
But it's now, and I think social media has expanded on it, because what do you see? What are the memes and reels? It's like, oh, to your point, after a long, stressful day, they'll post a reel, grab that glass of wine. They almost make you feel like, yes, I do need that glass of wine. It's like you can't cope on it. Even though you may not have the problem, you're just like, listen, I just want to drink tomorrow. You may not have a drink again for a week. But what if you're someone who's constantly watching that? So now you're like, wait, I need this to cope, and then it becomes
It got very normalized.
100% correct. Oh, my children, I can't. My kids are like this. I can't handle it right now. I need that drink. Well, let's go have a drink. It's become this thing, this culture, and yeah, I don't know how.
You hit that nail on the head, though. It's the idea that of feeling like the only one in the room, or understanding the environments in which you get the most triggered. Like that you are almost like, you know what? I feel like having that glass of wine. Like I find myself like when I'm cooking dinner, I want a glass of wine when I'm cooking dinner. I'm not a big drinker. We didn't grow up in a house. My family is not big drinkers. But when we do drink, it's very celebratory and it's very mild. Like it's not like I've been around a lot of, like family members that have been out of control. That's just not the way it was. And it was always involving food. Like wine with dinner, or with certain things. There was always like the drink was paired with the food. You have a digestivo, with your dessert or whatever. It's always like it's part of a meal, and it's never out of a numbing coping mechanism. And then, but when I'm finding like how does someone in a social environment where it's like it's almost like you're the odd man out, like that is the big problem for a lot of people, is how do you be the only one?
So I know that when I did 75 hard, I remember like during the challenge thinking, God, I can't wait till it's over. Like I love an old fashioned. That's my drink. I enjoy it, whatever. And the weekend we were finishing it, we were doing the Goggins challenge. That's how we closed out 75 hard, as if we hadn't done enough. And so a friend of mine that was there bought everything so that we could break the 75 hard challenge with a drink. And I had maybe 2 sips, and I was like, oh my God. Like for me, and I still will have an occasional drink, but after not drinking, and I had my cousin's wedding in the mix of all this. So, which is usually where I like to let loose. I'm the fun cousin. I'm drinking with my 20-year-old cousins. I had just as much fun. I was right there in the mix. I just didn't drink. And I think part of that is like, I didn't care. Like it didn't bother me that I wasn't drinking. And I don't know if that's just a me thing, but like I felt better. So I felt good about my choice. Right. Like I would drink and wake up in the morning so swollen. Like even at night, I'd go to bed. If I drank a lot of wine, my feet looked like pillows. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden I was like, I don't feel like crap anymore. Like I feel a lot better.
We just be real. Like I don't process almost anything the same way I do now that I do now.
My
like,
young friend,
I can't process. Like I can't
Terrible.
Drink really more than one glass. Like and I'm sipping it and it's like fine, but like everything feels different and processes different now for me. I don't know. Am I the only one here with that?
I'm going to go back to what you talked about with the food, right? So we pair the alcohol with the food, but and we talked about the inflammation before. When your body is like on high alert that there's a toxin in my body, I'm gonna use all my manpower in my body to detox this alcohol. It is not gonna digest your food. It's not gonna prioritize digesting your food because your liver is like, holy shit, get this out of me. And it's gonna take all of its power. So we pair the alcohol with the food so that it tastes better, but we're actually numbing our senses. So you're not actually tasting your food better. And then you're not even digesting your food better. So you feel like shit in the morning. And the thing about the habit with drinking at dinner time is because alcohol is such a high dopamine releaser. Like your brain's like, This alcohol is better than, it is proven. Your brain responds to alcohol with a higher dopamine release than sex, than food, than like a laugh with a friend. Like your brain goes on high alert. So if you're drinking that glass of wine while you're cooking dinner, that super like low stakes 1 glass of wine at dinner, your brain is used to every day at 5 p.m. we're going to get that dopamine release. We're going to get that dopamine release. And when you say that all day, I'm not going to drink that glass of wine at dinner, your brain's like, what the hell? Where is this dopamine release? You get the craving and you get the alcohol. So it's just kind of like, just when you learn the science behind it, it's like you can still make the choice whether you want to or not. But once you kind of understand what it's actually doing to you, and on the social piece, yeah, like you're going to lose some friends probably. You might lose a bit of your community, but the equal and most important part of that is you're going to gain people in your community if you're okay with going out on a limb and going to a meeting. And that doesn't have to be AA if that's not for you. I'm not saying it is so powerful for so many people, but it doesn't have to be what you do. I didn't go to AA. I went to local community support groups of moms in my local community where you realize, oh, wow, there's a lot of people flying under the radar here. And my rock bottom was nothing compared to these people. And that's okay. I didn't then turn around and be like, oh, I'm not that bad. I don't need to do this anymore. I just said, I'm in good support right now. And now my community is widened to so many people. I remember Daily Drip, one of my first meetings, sitting next to Suzette Bravo, sitting next to Nancy Rizzuto, sitting next to, there was one more person, I think I was sitting next to you maybe, and we're at the end of a table at a restaurant, and I said, oh no, I'm not drinking, I just stopped drinking, and Suzette said, congratulations, I'm on X and X years of sobriety, and Nancy said, yeah, I really rarely drink, or maybe she said, I don't drink at all, I can't remember, and I think at the time you said you weren't drinking either, and I was like, some of the most powerful women in my sphere right now, this is what they're doing? Okay. This is like, when you try to see like the 4-hour morning routine, it's like, actually, no, you just like can cut alcohol out and like amplify yourself to 1,000,000 degrees. So the social piece is hard, but it's also equally important to like do your work to find places that you are going to fit in. And sometimes it means saying no, like, no, I'm not going to go to that Sunday barbecue in my first 60 days of not drinking alcohol because I know that I'm going to be triggered by that. Right. And saying no to certain things to then eventually be able to regain that freedom in your life.
I think the deeper conversation on the mom side of things is, and in part of this article, it mentions the social media. It also says moms looking for community because the mental load of motherhood, which we did talk about on another episode, is so heavy that the coping skill of it is the alcohol, right? Or more so than not, finding the community like, yes, we need to drink. And oh, I know.
Yeah, it's almost like associated with like, let's drink and just like pour our souls out, right? You see it as like, this is how I'm going to unburden myself, and I'm going to, and it's like, listen, like I said, I don't operate in absolutes. I have zero judgment on it. I think it really is something personal. Like,
yes,
I drink or don't drink based on how it makes me feel. It's that simple. Like but I think like that's the key is you need to evaluate sort of like, how do I feel? How am I showing up? And why am I doing this? Like, cause when you get into a cycle where you are doing it to numb, to think, like, that's what I'm saying, that night that I sort of like just had this sort of bender because of like a year's worth of stuff in the moment, whatever. But that I woke up the next day and I was like, this didn't help. This, all my shit's still there. Yes. All my problems still real.
You know, Nicole, what you're saying is interesting because I've recently been doing a lot of reading, research, watching, listening all around community. The sociological like function of community, how it impacts us, because we are hardwired, right, to live in community. And one of the things and one of the concepts that I keep seeing coming up over and over and over again is the idea that it's a group that shares a ritual. And it's almost like the moms are the community. We're all on this very difficult journey. We're all feeling overwhelmed, the mental burden, the physical burden, the emotional burden, and we share this ritual that lives in our Stanley Cup. And it's like,
and we're not going to be judged. And we're not going to be judged because at 9 a.m. it's okay because we're going to be fine. But I think having conversations like this, someone like yourself, Kelly, and the Daily Drip, to have this on this platform to say, moms, it's okay. Or business people. I mean, we didn't even get to the networking aspect of it. And, you know, I know for me, like I said, I didn't really drink till maybe 25, 26. And really over the past maybe 4 or 5 years, I felt myself that when I am at a networking event, I have wanted to take a drink when I've never been that way. Like I said, I've always like, oh, I can be the life of the party without needing alcohol. I was very proud of that. But then the anxiousness of, do I want to? I have to kind of show up. I'm always having, we have this persona that people have always seen me maybe as this. So I'm like, all right, I'll drink the alcohol because I'm similar. I'm a happy person who drinks. I'm like my husband has a great time when when we've had a couple of drinks, like that's me. We enjoy it. So I'm like, all right, I'll take the drink. So we don't really think about it on the business side, but particularly talking just because I have the community for moms, I have taken more of a stance where I'm like, you know what? Yeah, we're not going to push the alcohol or have the mimosas or have the thing where because we want to show the bubbly, like we're going to have more of the mocktails. Again, especially because when I think about it, I have so many moms who are pregnant too that are like, well, now I can't participate. Or if they're breastfeeding, like there's so many levels, which we could even talk about that where a mom, how many times it's like, oh, I just can't wait to have my drink. It's like, I think we have to reverse it and in society show that like that shouldn't be the thing that we're aspiring to once we're done breastfeeding or once we're done 9 months of carrying this child, that it's like, oh, I can't wait to have a drink. Like, how are we failing society where it's like that's the thing that most mothers are looking forward to as opposed to having the baby and not needing the drink. I think these kind of conversations hopefully will flip that we're not looking forward to like, I can't wait to have that drink immediately after.
I think that's a good way
we're having
to
a baby.
like to leave everybody on this episode is what is going to be the alcohol replacement? Because I think, Kelly, I love that you said that at your first meeting you had that experience, because I can tell you, Romi and I, we do a lot of networking. It gets sloppy out there, and sometimes you cannot believe what you're beholding at a professional setting. And so I'm glad to see there is that. And I think I've found the Daily Drip community to be a safe haven for a lot of personal and professional development community support, because there's a lot of our members and our community are very of that mindset where they're wanting to feel their best. They're wanting to reach their fullest potential. They're wanting to learn, and they're curious about a lot of new ways to improve. And so if you guys all had to leave the audience with something that is the alcohol replacement, what do you think that would be? Like what is a great mechanism, tool, strategy, habit, routine for that?
I want to go deeper and say, I think you have to look at yourself in the mirror and saying, why do I feel I need to partake in whatever the thing is, whatever vice it is? Like you were saying, maybe it's food, whatever is not making you feel at your best. Like you have to look at yourself and say why, and really try and fix that first, if that's something that is a problem for you, in order to truthfully move forward. But if I had to give something that you said to look forward to, I would say, especially for a mom, just when you develop, when you pour into yourself, when you invest in the tools to make you better as a person, it trickles down to your children. So your children really should help be that motivation. Not that they, we should be doing things for ourselves as well, but the better that we are for ourselves just trickles down to us being better parents. We are more aware. We are more, whether they're watching us. I was very fortunate, again, to be in a household where alcohol was very prevalent, and I did not go the other way, but it's always constant in my mind. They do say alcoholism is, it's in the gene, the addiction, gene. So I think about that for my son. So when I'm trying to parent, which is why if we are having an adult party, I don't want him seeing flows of alcohol and thinking that this is a way of life. I'm very particular about that. I would just say, think about how you want to show up for your family. But truthfully, you need to have that kind of self-awareness talk with yourself and say, what is it? Am I missing community? What is it forcing me that I need this particular thing? Again, is it food? Is it sweets? Is it something, that's not making you feel good about yourself, but you need it to cope? Why is that? And then, of course, reach out for help if you need to.
I think that was good. Rome, what would you say?
I think you have to do what feels good to you. Like, I didn't like how it made me feel. I didn't like, a lot of things that were attached to it. And, for me, it was also like the networking event piece. Yes, I go to a ton of networking events, but because I grew up, I would never get in the car after drinking. Like, that was just like from the earliest age when I was a teenager. My parents were very aware that my sister and I were going to do stuff. So her whole thing was just promise me you'll never get in a car with somebody that has been drinking. And so we had an account with a taxi company, and we knew like to never get in a car with some. So I'm hyper aware of that. So going to a networking event, I would never have had more than a drink, if that. And even still, I just think it shouldn't be a judgment, whatever you choose, but I think it should be something where you self-reflect and think, how do I feel? Like, I hated how I felt. I felt puffy, I felt sick, and I didn't feel like it was solving anything that was going on for me. It just wasn't making anything better. And I like the fact that now I'm in a place where I feel good. When I make the decision to have a drink, I have that drink and I enjoy it. And I don't beat myself up over it. It doesn't, like I said, I don't like absolutes for me. So I found a very good place where most of the time I don't. And then if I'm having dinner and I want to have a cocktail, I'm going to have that cocktail. I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm okay with that. So I think I think it really is a personal choice, but I really think, yes, like kind of reflect on why you're craving that drink, but also like think about how it makes you feel. Because if it's not aligning with all the other things you have going on, then I feel like there's choices there that you need to start making.
Kelly, what would you say? What would you say to somebody who's being sober curious? Yeah. They're part of the sober curious movement, and they're finding themselves, they're now sober to their triggers. Mm-hmm. They've now realized what environments, what scenarios kind of trigger them, and they're trying to overcome those. Yeah. What would you say to that person?
Well, the first thing I would say, especially if you're still considering, like you said, kind of how you feel, is kind of going back to somebody else has a bigger problem than me, so I don't need to stop. So I always say it doesn't need to be a problem in your life for alcohol to feel like a problem. So it you don't have to have like a concrete, like, personal, complete explosion of your life to then be like, a wake-up call. Like, you could just decide, like you, Romi, like myself, that I don't feel good and this isn't something that's serving me. For me, having an absolute is very important because moderation is very hard for me. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to have that one drink, I'm probably going to have two. In the last few years, 3 was usually the max. But in previous years, 2017 and prior, Lord knows, like not enough fingers to count. But that was normal. I was not the only one. If anything, I was the one in the most control out of my friend group, which says a lot. So moderation for a lot of people who are struggling, especially if we're veering more on the side of like active addiction, we're talking about lifestyle changes right now. If you are thinking that you might have if you have Googled, do I have a problem with alcohol? Seek help, right? And go seek a professional help. However, moderation was very hard for me. So having an absolute, I'm just not going to drink today, and taking all of those decisions off of, I'm only going to drink from Friday to Sunday, and I'm only going to have 1 drink on a Sunday and then 2 drinks on this. At this wedding, I'm going to have, I'll limit myself to 4 drinks. No, that's the mental gymnastics I was going through. I don't know if anybody else does. And I was done with it. It was exhausting. So having that completely removed gave me a sense of peace, gave me a sense of confidence to be like, hell yeah, I'm the only person not drinking at this table, and I'm laughing the loudest, and I'm having the most fun, and I'm waking up at 8 a.m. to go to yoga. So my technique is plan stuff for the morning. Do your 8 a.m. yoga. Plan an 8 a.m. walk with a friend around Hubert State Park. Decide that you're going to go to some event, like a half-day personal development workshop, the Motherhood Summit. Decide that you're going to go do something for yourself that's early in the morning, so you kind of have this excuse to your friends, I have to go home by 6 p.m. after work because I have this really important thing that I love to do. Alternatively, if you are out, have your plan. Are you going to a restaurant? Look at their menu. Do they have mocktails? Do you have something in your head that you like, a sparkling water with a lime? Have your plan, and then have your accountability, whether that's a full community, whether that's just one person that you've said, look, I'm really struggling. I want to stop drinking alcohol. I don't know if I can do this alone. Can you just be my person that I text when I'm out and I feel like having one? That saved me. I was 3 months sober, and I went to Thailand for 5 weeks. And the last few times that I had lived in Thailand, of course, it's easy to get the juices in the smoothies, but it's also very easy to get the 40-ounce Chang beer and sit on the beach all day. So I had my group that I texted almost every day, here's my mocktail. And they're like, yeah, go mocktails. And it was never hard because I had my people back home that I didn't want to let down, and they would never judge me if I had a drink, but I had that tether. So that would be kind of my things is, like exercise, community type events, plan it early in the morning, have your excuses ready to go, have an accountability buddy, but mostly have a plan. Like stock your fridge with non-alcoholic beers if a Friday happy hour at your house by the pool is tough for you. Like have your NA options at home, have your plan, and like just know that there's so much waiting for you on the other side of this if this is something that's important to you. And Dry January is an amazing place to start. They say like it takes around like 60 to 90 days to really make a habit. So one of the coaches that I follow, Jen Hirsch, she's amazing. We actually managed her retreat for her in Jacksonville. She does a dry 100 and she does 100 days to really make a substantial change in your life. So look at coaches online that have challenges so that you're in communities with each other, and Dry January is a great place to start. And if you drink on New Year's Day or the 2 a.m. and New Year's Eve, you didn't discount the whole month. Start on January 3rd. Like there's no, it's okay to start.
Unless you're doing 75 hard.
Well, then you got to start all over.
You
Of course.
legit have to start all over
But
again.
that's okay.
But
And for someone that doesn't like absolutes, that's very interesting. So.
So it's interesting because it taught me a lot, and I'm actually their article to follow. About that very thing, the kind of discipline that it required, the kind of planning it required. But what I hear, and I think this is really the strongest message, is that it's find your community. Yes. Like surround yourself with people that are going to support you in whatever that is. If it is sobriety, great. If it's in entrepreneurship, great. If it's in motherhood, great. But being surrounded by people that share the same values and that have similar goals and objectives that are moving in the same direction is how you get ahead, like how you achieve all of these things.
100%. Yeah, I love the dry 100. I might do that. My husband would be so proud.
Dry 100. And I like that, the discipline of completing a challenge, and however long your challenge is, for life, for 75 days, for 100 days, whatever. But I hope that everyone who's listening maybe learned a lot. I learned a ton from you just around like the physiological impacts. I learned so much even just watching Romi go through 75 hard and like hearing her perspectives and like the conversations she was having to have, and then learning about your story. I love the fact that this was just a decision you made, that your rock bottom may not be what the perceived rock bottom needs to look like in order to go sober. I think that, to me, that's the most interesting part of your story, and just the way you really owned it and learned and consumed so much about it to kind of like fuel you, empower you. I find that so interesting, and I really admire that, and I'm inspired by it all. So I might do 100 days sober. My husband might be so happy because he's like not a drinker. So I'm always drinking by myself. No, I'm always having that glass of wine solo. Yeah, so he'll be happy. And so I hope that this episode was exciting for all of you, inspiring for all of you, gave you something to think a little deeper about, and maybe hit the ground running in 2025 with something completely new, a whole new challenge. So thank you everybody for joining us here on another episode of Her Pursuit.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Her Pursuit.
You can listen to new episodes every other Wednesday on Spotify or watch us on YouTube. Stay in the loop on all our virtual and in-person events, read our latest articles, and catch new episodes by subscribing to our free weekly newsletter.
Check out the episode notes for more details, and we'll see you here on our next episode of Her Pursuit.